Hi, this is Ed back again. Shout out to everybody on Patreon and Subscribestar. Thank you for your support. And shout out to everyone on the Hive blockchain for those upvotes. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk about the European Parliament and a number of things to start off, or at least I will be talking about a little bit later. I'll just be talking about some cursory things I found interesting. Nothing major. But when people look at the European Parliament, everyone always talks about as they should be, it's an interesting reference. They always talk about how it looks like the Tower of Babel. The reason why they reference this is that one of the original leaflets or things about the Europe, many tongues, one voice that came out, people referenced that it looked like the Tower of Babel on the front, and it did, right? And that's why they say it looks like the Tower of Babel, because there's a lot of different references there. It doesn't look like an exact match, and you could make the argument that the original illustrator was just using something which they could illustrate from. Whatever, that was what came out of that. But I find it interesting how no one mentions the giant capstone. Like, if you go look at it, it literally is in the shape of a giant capstone at the top of a pyramid. It is the shape of a giant capstone. Why? Why is that? Is that explained? Well, they dismissed the idea of it looking somewhat like the Tower of Babel, which you could say it is, or you could say it doesn't. They say it's just inspired by a Roman amphitheater, where you might have shows on in ancient Rome, etc. But the capstone itself, you don't ever hear a lot of people talking about the capstone. Why? And that is the problem with all this. It isn't that you design things that look like pyramids. If you go over to Las Vegas, there's lots of pyramids. People don't really go into conspiracies about the fact that someone builds a giant pyramid, right? Largely no one cares. There's lots of things that are giant pyramids. When people say, I'm going to build a pyramid or whatever and fill it full of Egyptian symbology, people go, whatever. Slot machines or whatever is in there. The thing is, in our world is largely full of these symbolisms that cost, vast sums of money, of the public's money, and they're never explained to the public. That's the problem. And whatever place you go to, you see this continuously. And these, of course, are examples of a different culture exerting its symbolism. If it was the same culture, as I said before, people would understand why you're creating it. You don't need to explain to us that there's a giant pyramid in Las Vegas, or if someone makes a pyramid on a farm, that they want to copy the Pyramid of Giza. You don't really need to explain that to anybody in any depth, because we'll understand. Our people create stuff. They create all kinds of different stuff. They create giant carrots, right? That's a symbol of their town. But the public understands what that means. They grow carrots here or whatever. It's the symbol of a restaurant. From the government's perspective, why do they consistently create these giant forms of symbolisms? Or, you could say the Vatican or whoever take and exist via the public funds. That's how the Vatican exists, right? Or it doesn't need to do that anymore because it controls so much financial assets. But for the most part, that is the kind of idea of church. It survives via donations and estate donations and things like that. Well, why is there a giant reptilian there? Why is that architecture the same? By the way, this is the last string of these videos. I'm doing this as part 3 now. We'll go back to the news roundup in the next video. So just to encapsulate, in this third video, we're just talking about, and basically, I guess, closing a type of loop on it, although it goes forever. That's the problem I have, right? So I want to know why you put that there. If people are paying for it, why is that? Why does that exist? And why is that a giant capstone? Why don't you explain the reason why? No transparency whatsoever. For instance, at the Gotthard tunnel ceremony, we'll get to some more information a sub sent me actually, I thought was quite interesting. But in the Gotthard tunnel ceremony, the actual reference they go with is that it references a folklore tale where there was a bridge. This is what they say. They say that it was referencing a folklore tale, which, by the way, it doesn't resemble hardly in any shape or form. But the folklore tale is that there was a bridge, or this village wanted to build a bridge. This is how it goes, and it was toil and effort, and they couldn't really do it. And the devil showed up, and he says, I'll build that bridge for you if you give me the first soul that crosses that bridge. And the villagers go, sure, we'll do that. And they had a trick in mind. So the devil, created a bridge fairly quickly over this ravine or whatever. And then the villagers, the first soul to cross the bridge was a goat. So they put a goat, walked across the bridge. And the devil got angry and he threw a boulder at them. He missed everyone, and the boulder hit the mountain or whatever. So that's the narrative that they say they're repeating in the ceremony. It doesn't really resemble it. Now, the giant rock that's rolling along, that doesn't look like a boulder to me. For example, boulders, in classical definition, have a rounded surface because they're associated with rivers. Don't need to be technical about this, but that was my assumption as to what a boulder goes without going into researching it. And that is an asteroid, right? And in the folktale, no one gets killed because the boulder misses. Well, in this particular narrative, everyone gets killed. Everyone's laying down and basically dead. That does not look like a boulder, okay? A lot of the things in here, and that's not a goat walking across some kind of bridge with a bunch of eclipse symbolism. What's with all the eclipse symbolism? That's their narrative for it. What's all this eclipse symbolism, right? By the way, a sub sent me this. I'll read through this in a moment. But what is all that eclipse symbolism? And why are they all dressed up as twigs and trees? A lot of the politicians put on these, or a lot of the elites there were putting on these headdresses that had all these twigs. And what does this have to do with anything? Nonetheless, anyway, I just thought I'd mention that quickly. Now, a sub sent me some stuff regarding the Bible, actually. Now, you might not be a Christian. It doesn't really matter in this specific arena, because what we're referencing here is just using certain symbolisms as maybe a symbol of something, right? An apocalypse, an event, or whatever the case is. Who really knows? Of course, this is interpretive, so you can interpret it multiple different ways. But just in reference, what I talked about a couple of days ago was the Black Sun iconography, or at least the eclipse symbolism, I guess you would say, in the Denver airport. And that was layered into the floors there. And of course, the eclipse symbolism in the Bank of America mural, etc. And on Macron's floor, the Black Sun iconography, which is, Black Sun, eclipse, right? The eclipse turning the sun black is one interpretation. Of course, there are other interpretations there. But he sits on a giant black sun iconography in terms of the flooring. What does all this mean? Well, just like the giant capstone, they will never tell you, right? They're never going to tell you what it means. That's because it's language of a different culture, right? What you're seeing is the flags of a different kingdom, signs of it flying, and they have no intention whatsoever of telling you about it at all. And, they just will not tell you about it. So anyway, sub sent me this, who I'll keep an on, obviously. If you send me anything, I'll keep an an on. Unless you say otherwise, unless you want me to plug you or say who you are. But, when they explained this, send me this information actually from the Bible and regarding revelations or, an apocalyptic event, there was a lot of the eclipse symbolism. Now, I read this kinds of stuff. I just forgot about it at the time to mention it. But here we are mentioning it here. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. So you'd expect some kind of like shaking there. Now, I'm not saying. All I'm saying is you can take something from a religious text, the Bible in this specific case. A lot of these images are a lot of the stuff that they use are actually, there are a lot of Christian themes in it, but in this case, of course, you do have eclipse symbolism, as you see there. As you can see there, eclipse symbolism. That is literally eclipse symbolism. Again, what does this have to do with the devil and the bridge? Again, eclipse symbolism, and then everything turns red, right? Right? In this specific case, don't have the time code. There's a 22, actually. It turns red in the Gotthard tunnel ceremony, and this is at 19. So after the sun turns as black as sackcloth, the full moon became red as blood. Red as blood, right? Like they are referencing, just in their symbolism, an apocalypse, right? Or apocalyptic symbolism that's well known. Of course, you can take symbolisms from something and put it into your event and show. Now, why would that ever be in some kind of folklorish tale about the devil crossing a bridge? There is nothing in it. It doesn't even resemble it. It's like small notes of it. Now, maybe they had it written down on paper, but of course that doesn't matter. You interpret it how you will, just like you say, I want a building to put politicians in, right? We're just building a building to put politicians in. Okay, well, hang on, I'll just go over and talk in this other room to my friends, and we'll capstone, we'll put like this other Saturn symbolism inside it for Saturnalia or whatever. So again, there you have it from the Bible, right? The sun becomes as black as sackcloth in eclipse. Eclipse symbolism, right? And then also, the moon became like blood. Now, historically, these things can happen. Obviously, if you're just looking at this in terms of interpreting this to historical events, obviously there's been eclipses in the past, and obviously you can make the moon turn blood red. That can happen from just dust kicked up, depending upon where you are in the world. If you're in certain countries in the northern hemisphere, close to the Middle East, for example, the moon can definitely be turned blood red by just the fact is that the Sahara winds or something kick up dust into the atmosphere, which comes down and can turn different planets and things, make the optics of the moon look red. However, I'm just saying that this, you could take stuff from the Bible, and it seems like they're taking a little a possible interpretation of what I'm saying. They're taking they're taking something from that and they're referencing in this, or maybe they are reading from a different version of the biblical text itself. Remember, the King James itself, which is basis for the Catholic religion, for example. The King James Bible, there are many other interpretations of it. Just like I said, there's many, and there is a Masonic interpretation of Jacob's ladder from the Bible, which is completely different from the Bible itself. Okay, these are certain texts that are heretical kinds of texts, and their interpretations. So they could be directly referencing something like that. I have no idea. And of course, this is just a grain of salt interpretations, but I thought was interesting here to mention. Also, they talk about the fact is that then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone slaved and free hid themselves in caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and the wrath of the Lamb, and so on and so forth. And there is Revelations. And what happened, talking about everyone hiding themselves in mountains and things like that. So if all this was specifically interesting to them in order to reference an apocalyptic event, they've done a good job of it, right? They've built tunnels in mountains, at least literally, and you would say symbolically, within Switzerland, within Germany, within all these different places have numerous underground bases. In fact, I was just referencing today, let me just find it here because I've got a number of slides. Okay, so here was a classified document. Of course, this is well known now. This is from the CIA reading room, which talks about one of the most famous bases. This is just in Germany to reference this, okay? But it's surprisingly enormous in size when you have a look at it. This is I think it's called the Wolf's Den or something like that. That's the only time it's kind of referenced, but it never really goes into the scope and size of it. This is from World War II, and these are some takeaways from a CIA document about the underground base in Ratzenberg. The underground complex itself was 38 kilometers long and 3.5 kilometers wide. It was an underground city. It took the Germans 6 years to build. The facilities located at least 30 meters below the surface. That's huge, 30 meters, right? Below the surface. It had 3 independent electrical power plants. Obviously it had communications, it had its own water supply system. But I'm only referencing this very quickly to show, I mean, there's a World War II example of underground bases, and where are we at now? That isn't a base, it's like a city, right? Well, obviously, the cities today are enormous. And I'm not saying you have to take the Christian interpretation. Again, I'm just saying that if you're looking for symbolism to put on a ceremony with a specific message, you can take symbolisms from elsewhere and use that as an overall symbol for the apocalypse, which it is. It seems to match a lot of it. People go underground, so on and so forth. You can reference some here under there, which the individual sent me as a summary because they see my analysis of the Gotthard tunnel ceremony. It was very interesting. I forgot all about Revelations. Recently, in my recent interpretation, obviously I'm familiar with Revelations. But there you have it. The stars fell from the sky, and it referenced a fig tree. Remember when we were mirroring this, that tree in the background, I don't know if it's a fig tree, but this looked like a comet. I mean, I don't know what any of this means. That's the point. I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm just trying to interpret it like everybody else is interpreting it. But nonetheless, there is no mass death within the folklore of the devil and the bridge. And this is a tunnel, by the way. This looks like an asteroid to me. There's a lot of reasonings for that. I do not know exactly what's going on. It does seem like this is some type of not reset event or something like that. Not like the Great Reset, which is happening right now. I mean, look at the price of olive oil in New Zealand. Not that I buy olive oil because it's too expensive. I don't buy oil in general, seed oils. But I was just saw the price of it was like $30 for a bottle of olive oil and $20 for another bottle. And you might say, well, prices fluctuate. They always have worldwide, depending upon all types of factors. I'd agree with that. But it seems like everything's like that. Here in New Zealand, different places, it's more expensive. In Australia, it's much cheaper, right? But New Zealand's largely, it's going down the drain quite rapidly because how did it start going down the drain? Because they've never thought that cruelty, they thought because we're a first world country, we're somewhat wealthy back then, prior to COVID, they thought, okay, we can afford to be cruel, right? That was their reasoning. The government, the people thought, well, we can afford to be cruel to other people. And they made a massive mistake. You can't afford to be cruel to other people because those other New Zealanders will just leave. Okay, they got fired from their jobs. They say, they're all grandstanding, all the public here are grandstanding, saying, yeah, well, they shouldn't be working if they don't want to take the vaccine. I mean, get out of here. Get lost. Go do something else. Go live somewhere else is what they said. Those people did. They left. They went and lived somewhere else, and, God bless them. I wish them well on their journey. I think that's fantastic. Why put up with it? It wasn't just the government. Okay, it was half New Zealand. It was the majority in New Zealand. I lived here. I felt it. I heard tales from friends and other people of how people were treating each other. So it wasn't just the government. The government was the one that was messaging it and using propaganda, but the people were fine with it. The people were completely fine with it, right? As they are with most things. You have to accept that. I think that's one important lesson to accept. Generally, people are fine with being, with not being free, having no freedom of speech, no freedom to do anything, and being monitored 24/7. Most people are fine with that. I think they're saying we have to accept. Not only are they fine with it, but they enjoy it, right? And what do you have to swap in order to get someone to feel like to be fine with being monitored? well, just a few steps, it turns out, and they're fine with it. Anyway, there is the asteroid itself. Of course, you can make your own interpretation on that. As I said, black sun iconography is everywhere. Look at Germany. Look at the Ukraine. I mean, some of their symbolisms of the black sun, literally on their military gear. A lot of this, of course, is imported from the Nazis with their black sun iconography. You can look at the famous castle there, and their search, and they're heavily occultic. The Nazis were, obviously. It's riddled through everything they do. So riddled through a lot of what they did, and of course, black sun is great. Emmanuel Macron has no problem with his black sun carpet, as I talked about the other day. So there you have the eclipse, and there you have maybe the interpretation of the blood red moon, and maybe these references are in here. Of course, you have, as I stated just then from Revelations, if you want to take that symbology, and the sun became as black as sackcloth, the moon became like blood. And what do you have over here? You have an eclipse, right? And then you also have this, whatever this means. Maybe does that mean some reference to the blood moon? I don't know. I really don't. I mean, it could mean some veil being lifted. We're in the dark here for the most part, because we're not, even if we were inside a mystic school, okay, we wouldn't necessarily ever be able to interpret what's happening here, because this is a different mystic school, right? This is different stuff entirely. But giants, just very quickly, because I mentioned this the other day, again, this is more of a trip, overview. I'm not going into anything specifically in any detail, but I'm just closing it down, closing the loop, so we head off on the news roundups day after tomorrow. But here in the Rockefeller Center, you have giants, right? In the first panel of the Bank of America mural, you have a sleeping giant. Now, giants are popular within mythologies, within religious texts. I mean, it just referenced the Bible has giants in it. So you're going to get some display of giants. But it's just interesting, that's all. I mean, the heights of power, they have a lot of reference with giants, right? If you go to someone's house, do you see an over complement of posters of giants, right? Well, why do you see it at the heights of power, right? Rockefeller building, of course, here as well. And of course, as I said many years ago, if you mirror this, it's kind of, it creates a pyramid, obviously, but it also creates an eye of providence, basically where the giant's head is. Not completely, but round about in the middle. If you fold it to a certain point, you could say it does. It doesn't create it perfectly. One thing I think is interesting about this was, just this kind of idea. It's weird. It's in my head, of underground bases. Then you have a second mural, and of course the confusion, and there's something. Why choose these specific symbolisms, right? Again, that's the bank is a private institution, so I guess it doesn't have to explain itself to anybody, but. The things created with public funds, they should have explanation, but of course private institutions don't have to explain anything. But I just thought it was interesting. Again, here is the full type of mural that you see there. Now I have looked at this, and I've mirrored certain things. I don't think there's a specific key there unless you took the actual pyramid itself. When you do mirror it, it takes these two wings, but I mean, this is like, you're getting into the realm of interpreting clouds. Okay, if there isn't some perfect key there, like there was with a half a heart, like in the Bank of America mural, which I think is definitely the key to actually mirroring it, because then it kind of represents classic Freemasonry symbolism, perfect in its arrangement, obviously different, but perfect, good in its arrangement there via the key there, which was the half of the heart, which you don't seem to get there unless you're taking the stick as half a pyramid again. But that's, you could interpret it however you want. I always interpreted this to the background as being Jacob's ladder, but again, you can interpret that a different way. That was just the symbolisms there with giants. Of course, why are they always going on about giants? You know, they seem to be everywhere, right? Also, something I just talk about very briefly in regarding the EU building. Just briefly, I was looking at it, you know, it's like looking at it as I have for years and just thinking to myself, isn't it funny that they never really explain anything like this? I mean, that's clearly a capstone, isn't it? There is another view of it there. And then a side here, which is, I believe in the middle of this oval, which is like an eye, right? You could interpret this to actually be an eye if you wanted. This would be interpreted classically as the eye at the top of the pyramid, at least in regarding that capstone there. So here is the object itself. Anyway, there's a sphere in the middle. If you look at this, the sphere has actually got a series of pentagons within inside it, okay, which of course is a classical shape. It's made up of pentagons, as a matter of fact, and the question is why pentagons? For instance, in the United States, you have obviously the Pentagon. Well, here you have a shape which is a sphere made up of pentagons. Now, that's probably, I should say, geometrically, probably a very complementary shape to a sphere, you know, a pentagon. But I just thought it was interesting anyway. It had this little sphere there. I don't exactly know what it means. When I first seen it, I thought these were like hexagons, and it was referencing maybe something else like Saturn or something. Although, if it was doing that, you know, you'd expect this to probably be perfectly black or something like this, you know, something like inside a cube or something. But I just thought that was an interesting little thing that's there anyway. Now let's just talk about this. As I said, I'm just going on about stuff because the other day I talked about the Canberra building. And I thought maybe a lot of people that listen to my video are actually unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. Well, here, of course, is a Washington, D.C. street map. Now, most people that are down the rabbit hole, I can see that my green screen is kind of killing that image a little bit. Doesn't matter, we'll head over to, you're all familiar with the Washington, D.C. street map, etc. I wonder if it was killing my other image that I put there. I don't look at that. No, it wasn't killing that one. Or this one. No, it's just really killing this one because there's so much green on the screen of this image. But anyway, everyone knows what the Washington, D.C. street map is and how that there's a giant owl at the top of the pyramid. I don't really have to explain that, at least to this audience. As you can see there, again, it's killing that specific owl picture. It's putting stars through it. But you get the gist. At the top of the pyramid, on the Washington, D.C. street map, there is the Capitol building, and the Capitol building is in the belly of the owl, right, which some people depict as Moloch. Or, to be fair, other interpretations are of an owl from, you know, Greek mythology. These types of things, actually, it's not, it's Middle Eastern or something, isn't it, where that owl is a depiction of knowledge or something like that. However, in this specific depiction, we have the Capitol building in the belly of the owl itself. And of course, in the back of the $1 bill in the United States, you have a pyramid with an eye at the top. So a lot of people will interpret this to be the same kind of imagery. And you can see the Capitol of the United States Capitol building there is that giant shape of an owl. And of course, the owl is very popular within the United States, within the heights of power, whether you go to the press club or the symbol of the press club, or you go, I guess, more fairly to the Bohemian Grove, we have a giant owl made out of, I believe this is fake stone. It's actually a wooden frame with, you know, like a cement over top in order to create the shape of an ancient owl. And they perform their rituals to this owl. Again, heights of power, right? Nixon talked about going to the Bohemian Grove, you know, not in a positive way. You know, Ronald Reagan was there, multiple different people there. You can see pictures of it, obviously, of them at the Bohemian Grove. So the point is, what is this symbolism mean? You know, they design entire streets to point to the specific spot, and they designed the owl here to look at it. Now, you know, obviously Washington, D.C. and a lot of these plays are influenced by Masonic symbolisms, right? And the Masons, in terms of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, or the Masons long ago, before they moved the capital, they were all, done great things like rights to bear arms, rights to free speech, so many great things. But what does this mean? No one actually knows what this particular owl means. Maybe it means knowledge or power or whatever the case is. I don't think it's much. I don't know exactly what the owl in the middle of the Bohemian Grove means, but I'm talking about this. We go over, it's certainly not a place I'd hang out, that's for sure. If we go over to the Canberra building, it's the same story, right? Years later, after this was designed, they talked about how the triangle is basically a triangle that's there to link two important places. They talk about none of the Masonic or design to it. So here is the triangle itself. I'll show you in a minute. They say the parliamentary triangle of Canberra. They say this is just between, to link three places together. In fact, they have this on this diorama. I guess this isn't a diorama. It's more like a miniature scale map. They have these three locations which they've put these 3 points which they've linked up with lasers, funnily enough. Actually, I don't think that's a laser. They refer to this as a laser. That's not actually a laser, obviously, because that's just a piece of nylon that's in the shape of a triangle, because you can see it's bent with an actual light beam through it, although they call it the parliamentary laser. Look at this, a model of Canberra with the parliamentary triangle shown by the green lasers. Since when did green lasers, why are they slightly bent? It is true that you can bend light. Okay. But I don't think that's what they're doing on a little diorama there, or a little scale model. No, that's a piece of fishing wire that has, or a piece of fiber optic, okay. To be fair, it's probably a piece of fiber optic, it's a fiber optic cable in the shape of a little thing. And of course, what is fiber optic though? It holds light. Before we get into the Philip Corso definition of fiber optics, which he says was basically alien tech given to humanity. Do I believe that? I don't believe anything. I don't even know if I'm really sitting here recording this video. Parliamentary triangle of Canberra, that's what they say it is, just links these three places. But is that really what's happening? No, I don't think so. For instance, if you go up to the top, this is just loaded with basically Masonic symbolisms. And if the Masons built it and paid for it and designed it, fair enough, but why don't they tell anybody? Why doesn't anybody tell it? Masons have their own Netflix show now. Just tell people what this kinds of stuff means. Was it designed by Masons? I don't know, but I would assume so. Many years ago, of course, the Masons were much more powerful in the 1950s. When was the Canberra building here developed? I have the exact date. Don't I have the exact date here? They just talk about the parliamentary triangle over and over again. Anyway, a long time ago, right, in a galaxy far, far away when this was made, you can see the triangle goes right up right up to where? Well, you can see it more clearly in this. It goes right up the top to a capstone. At the top of the capstone is a literal pyramid. There's another view you can see there from that specific street map. Here is another one. This is the parliamentary building at the top, which you can see is inside a giant triangle with a pyramid right at the top. Okay, this is all just, and right between the triangle itself, as you can see there, the great arches, the great triangle here, you can see the pyramid right there at the top of the building itself. Why? What does this mean? Why is it there? See, my point is this. You can have a building which is just a structure. If you go down to, I don't know, a building built in the 1920s and you say that's Art Deco, okay, it might be an Art Deco building and it might have Art Deco art inside it. But, it's a building, it's a shape, right? It's a standardized shape. Why spend all the money making sure all the roads are in a giant triangle to go all the way up to a pyramid, a metal pyramid that's lit up at night to make an actual pyramid? Sometimes it's lit up, not all the time. And then underneath that, you've got another pyramid of glass, right? Why? And you've also got all the steps there. For instance, if you go down and count the actual steps here, as you can see in the imagery, you can reference to the amount of steps that are on the pyramid. Of course, this is all symbolic. There are basically, it all matches up, the amount of steps. People say the steps themselves, there's reference to Jacob's ladder, right? Stepping up to we view God. And of course, the Masonic, I believe it's the Masonic interpretation. It's a heretical text anyway. That's not kind of like a signed off text by, the Pope, who's sitting inside a giant reptilian. He has to sign off on all the texts, right, to make them accurate. Because we need their signature, right, to make you believe in something. That might be one day, maybe Candace Owens, of course, is a big time Catholic. Nothing wrong with that. I've got friends that are Catholics. I've known Catholics. They're very nice people. I was raised by parents who are Catholic. I was an altar boy. But I wonder when Candace Owens will go, or I wouldn't, it would be very bad form for me to show up, some Catholic's house, like a clear file with giant pictures of the reptilian monument in it. And, I used to have video of it. As I said, I used to have all this great video. It's all lost now. Can't find it on YouTube. It basically doesn't exist, even though the place gets millions and millions of visitors. I almost can't believe that. It's almost like it's controlled by magic or something. Why can't people remember or see it? Maybe people are just not meant to see, right? So anyway, you can't these steps, or maybe I'm insane. Maybe I've got the problem. I'm sure to a perfectly sane person I would sound like a lunatic. But anyway, at the top of this pyramid, the Canberra building, you have that triangle there. And I just wanted to tell people, because I went on about it the other day, but I didn't really reference it or tell people what I was talking about. Of course, this type of symbolism with street maps or locations, or you can go to United, what do they call, the United Artists, the big creative rights agency or whatever they are in the States, and their whole entire building is a giant Masonic pyramid with an eye. I don't know if it's Masonic, or it might be they're referencing Egypt or something or whatever, but their building is a giant triangle with the Eye of Ra in it. So, obviously the symbolism's everywhere. I'm talking about stuff that's created at the heights of power, or very powerful people creating something, not if you want to make a driveway that resembles a pyramid. I'm not saying if you make a driveway that resembles a pyramid, you're in the Illuminati. By the way, the real thing is that, the thing about it is the elites, the real elites of this world, they have a secret religious system, and they believe it. Okay, this isn't all just because this isn't just because like suddenly they've kind of like fell off the canoe and hit their head, and they've woken up and they're like want to join the Freemasons or want to join some type of mystic school, and now they're creating this type of architecture. People create these types of architectures because they believe that in the creation of this, there's some kind of harnessing power from an outworldly presence. I do believe that. I believe that's what they do, right? They believe in sacred geometry has meaning in terms of being able to direct power and flow. And this really references back to something quintessentially like the Rice experiment, which you might not believe in or not. I'll explain that a bit later because I do have a slide. Let's move on because I'm just doing an overview. Again, just not particularly saying anything, just taking a journey through the labyrinth, having a look at a few things. By the way, here's something I found was funny, and I said this the other day, but I went in to Claude and I started to ask her questions. First of all, I dropped the picture. This is the picture of, here it is here. Obviously, I've seen it a million times, but there's the picture of the Pope's audience hall. There are the big eyes and the fangs. And the Pope sits in the middle. It's kind of hilarious every time I look at it because I can't believe that's actually real. I literally can't these days. Anyway, I was showing this to Claude, and I didn't want to like tell it anything. So I said, this image says, explain what you see in this image and then tell me what it looks like. What is the symbolism? They say, this image shows the interior of the Pope's audience hall, so on and so forth. The most striking feature is the dynamic curved ceiling, radiating lines that create a tunnel-like or serpentine effect, drawing the eye towards the stage center where the papal audiences are held. A serpentine effect. So I go, what do you mean a serpentine effect? What are you talking about? It goes, yes, right, to question that word choice. Are you serpentine because of the curved, undulating lines in the ceilings and walls create a flowing snake-like visual pattern? But it should be more blah, blah, blah. I described it as serpentine simply because of the flow. And then I went on. It looks like a giant snake, I said. And then Claude goes, you're absolutely right. It looks like a giant snake. Now, I know I'm talking to an AI. There's a lot of this kind of like, if you tell an AI something, not all the time, but it'll usually agree with you. It'll just come up with ways to agree with you. But anyway, I just thought it was funny. I went off to look at the architect, which I've done many videos on before. And I did want to show this here. I did reference the end of the snake's head at the other building by the way outside. You're absolutely right. From the aerial view, it resembles a snake's head. It's remarkably clear. The overall shape of the building forms a distinct triangular diamond pattern that looks exactly like a snake's head viewed from above. See, it's not just me seeing it. It's like this kind of AI is agreeing with me. Of course, it's designed to agree with you and like kind of pat your head and say that you know what you're talking about. But I went off to Nervi there. What's his name? Oh, the architect behind the Vatican Reptilian Hall, as I like to call it. And I was looking at some of his other designs. I mean, look at this design, and you tell me that's not a flying saucer design. I mean, the person that designed the Reptilian Vatican Hall actually designed a flying saucer-shaped building. Now, I'm aware that buildings can actually be dome-shaped. It doesn't actually mean that they're alien, okay? So we're not staring at clouds, looking at shapes and just finding them, as some people say. You know, interpret it what you will, but it literally looks to me like he designed, this is one of his designs here, which was a literal flying saucer. I threw this into Claude. They did a translation of the language there, which is all in Spanish, so you can see it, but this is flying saucer-shaped dome. And it is a nice building. Say what you want about him as an architect and the mystery surrounding what he was thinking if we had a time machine when the Pope walked in and said, listen, we want a giant snake. That's probably not what had happened. They would hire someone that had a complementary philosophy and religious system to their own, which apparently via the projected symbolism in the 1971 Pope's Audience Hall has nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. Because I don't know how anybody could interpret that to have anything to do with Christianity. For instance, look at the thing or the statue behind, right? The Pope sits in the chair and is the voice. Now, if you look at the statue at the base of the statue here, you can see that there's this kind of like guttural thing, like this is like it's inside this nest of something. This isn't a, what is this? I don't even know this is this supposed to be, it's supposed to be Christian religious system. It's supposed to be Christian symbology, is it? And of course, this was the statue, famous bronze, talking about how this is Jesus rising from an apocalypse. Look at it. Look at how dark and foreboding and full of shadows and stuff. They could have had the Virgin Mary there. They could have had Jesus on a cross. They could have had anything. They had this thing, right? By the way, that's what I said many years ago. I go, where are all the crosses in here? Right, where's all the statues of Mary or something, or paintings or something? Where is all the... It doesn't exist. In fact, they try to get as far away from Christianity as possible, it would seem. Catholic Church, everyone. And of course, the Pope, it's not so much the voice of the serpent reptilian, okay, and the symbolism. He's the protector of this reptilian, but he is in the mouth. So I guess you could, yes, you could say he was the voice of the reptilian. But there you have it in that specific symbolisms. So anyway, I was just looking back at some videos. So Catherine Austin Fitz said, she says that she made this, she said this on Danny Jones's podcast, which I think I referenced a few videos ago. I might have even referenced this actually, I can't remember now. But she was talking about how ex-Bush officials make, well, this is the headline from the Daily Mail, ex-Bush official makes shocking claim about who is really running the world. It's demonic. Former Bush official has made a shocking claim about the mysterious group she calls Mr. Global is actually pulling the strings in the world. She was U.S. Assistant Secretary of Housing and Development there, and she said that she explains that the world leaders are overly influenced by the occult and are merely puppets. I think you have interdimensional intelligence, which is operating demonic intelligence, Fitz stated. Now, you might not believe in that, but that's what I believe the elites believe, and I believe that they don't do all of this, all the symbolism and stuff like that. They don't make, I mean, if you think about it in terms of, let's say a risk assessment, if you're a secret cabal of people running the world, you would actually increase your risk in terms of your risk to your group and your ability to operate if you're projecting your symbols all the time and making yourself look like a bunch of Satanists. So there's a certain cost in actually projecting those symbols. So if you look at it logically, why would they pay the cost in exposing themselves unless they didn't believe, at least in a basic level, that they were getting something in return? They believe that these symbols and what they're doing actually give them and help them maintain power. They believe in this kind of idea of karmic effect in its basic terms, whereby if you are going to kill a bunch of people, if you don't cryptically say that you're going to do it, then you can't reflect the karma off yourself, right? You will have to deal with the karma, which will directly flow back to you. But if you tell your opponents, even in a cryptic way, like a prayer or something, or in some architecture or whatever, that you're going to do this to them, they do not have the eyes to see or decrypt it, or do not have the will in order to decrypt it or understand it or even try to do it, then the one that owns the karma in their perspective is the people that you're killing. Therefore, the karma will not reflect back on you. It's a weird way to look at it, but if you have a look at the Rice experiment and things, I'm not saying this is true. This is just interesting stuff that I have seen, and I actually have done the Rice experiment myself. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, just head out and, of course, go out and do the Rice experiment yourself, which is just this. You have to be very careful, obviously, because we don't want to just basically you want to get 2 jars, mason jars, and you want to boil those jars, right? In a pot. Get the pot, you boil the jars like you're going to do canning, okay? And then what you'll do is on the stove, you'll wash all your rice, okay? Wash it, put it in there, use distilled water if you can, but you can use normal water because the rice which you're using is going to be distributed into those 2 mason jars. You cook the rice, okay? And then you distribute very carefully using the same spoon, a chunk of rice, a couple of spoons of rice into each of those mason jars that you've boiled. You put the lids on both of those jars, and then you put them in the same location, preferably somewhere with some sunlight, okay? But in a similar location, okay? Now I am aware that there's many different environmental factors that will adjust the actual way that bacteria things and microsystems develop within these types of jars. But if you put love on one jar and then hate on the other jar, and you generally go up to one jar and you look at it and say how much you hate it, the rice inside it, and then you go up to the other one and say how much you love it. People have stated, and I did this experiment twice myself, whatever it was, people have stated that in the jar that says love, it decays far less slowly. Now this comes back to believing that water has when they're looking at water has some kind of memory or some kind of weird effect. I'm not saying any of this stuff's real, it's just interesting, isn't it? So the rice takes the water and is acting as a conduit for that, apparently, according to the narrative. So one jar, the one that's got hate in it, if you generally go up to it and you say how much it hates it, it's going to decay at a much faster rate than the one that has love on it. Now, I did this experiment twice, and I got the same results, which is the jar with love on it didn't even decay, right? Hardly ever. You could probably go eat that rice after like 3 weeks or a month. The other one turned into a moldy mess and collapsed into a pudge substance. Now, obviously, as I said, the microsystems inside this are influenced by all types of different factors, including the jar. You could say the thickness of the jar is directly related to the way that light will interact with the substances in the middle, where it is in its relation to how the sun moves. For instance, if you have a tree outside and the sun is moving, although it might look like you're getting a distributed amount of light between both jars, obviously the interference of the tree and the way that it moves and winds and all types of variations will adjust the temperature within inside those jars. So you could take those jars and instead of putting them on a windowsill, you could take them and put them in your closet, okay, with a lamp there. You can do stuff in order to be more kind of, I guess, scientific and try to weed out types of errors within it. And you can do that once, and then you can do it again. You could do it with a dozen jars. You could do it with how many jars you want, but you're going to have to be honest about the other application here, and that is you go up to it and you actually genuinely project that type of feeling into these jars, right? You love one jar, you don't like the other jar. Now, I'm not saying that's real, but that's the kind of world that the occultists believe is real. Basically, what we're saying is the idea is that there's a hidden machinery of this world, which is being hidden from humanity as the way that it really runs. They are taking advantage of this system and using mechanisms in order to adjust it to get outcomes, right? Look at the Bible. It says to love your brother, right? It says to care and love other people. To forgiveness, right? And, all kinds of things like that. Look at different communities that live by those philosophies. One is, when people first go onto the raw food diet for a few months, they feel so purified. I can testify to that. You feel like your blood is like pure. That there's all these things happening. I don't know what's going on, okay? I'm just telling you that's the philosophy that these people in charge believe. And that's why they project these symbolisms. So here's Catherine Austin Fitz actually going on about this. David Icke actually goes on about it as well. Whether you believe any of this, it's kind of quite interesting that people are actually talking about it, I guess. This, obviously, people will be talking about this kind of stuff forever, right? But it's interesting how now a lot of people are having kind of sort of like a spiritual awakening, whereas they're coming to the opinion that what they think and what they decide to do actually does have an effect on the world. Now, you can say on a psychological level, obviously it does, and on a social level. But a lot of people are kind of getting up to this kind of idea that there's a spiritual element to the world as well. A lot of people are waking up that I don't believe maybe were on this bend before. So, what's the modern world? Well, you have these, subliminal messaging within concerts like Satan. This is The Weeknd that sang this, or lyrics, which is talking about the blinding lights. And this is Blinding Lights. This was written by his writing, I guess the person associated with him, or him himself. I can't actually remember. I think that's the actual Weeknd himself. But, what's the blinding light, which is actually a reference to Lucifer. A lot of people that are in the cult, actually there's a mystic school, and the Gnostic interpretation of Judeo-Christian religious systems is actually that there's a demiurge or a type of fake entity that's ruling humanity. And the real entity they believe, the enlightened one, is actually Satan. That's what they believe. What does that come with? Well, you tell me the teachings of Christ and how that feels as opposed to, and just think of it just on an organic level, the difference there. Obviously, all the celebrities are on board. There is they're all cultists. Well, their systems of displaying their symbolisms are all occultic symbolisms for the most part. For instance, they always have to dress in red. They always have to have horns, right? And not in an AC/DC way where they're rocking out to a guitar and they've got like flashing horn lights, okay? It's not like that. It's a different type of thing entirely. They're just like No, I mean like child trafficking type of Satanists or whatever. You've got this kind of thing, or blood and shoes. Of course, if you do this, like Little Nas does it with his video where he's having mock sexual relations with the devil. Of course, YouTube is going to blow him up to like 12 million views in one day. Of course. Why not? Yeah, why not? Ask yourself, would a video about anything to do with Christianity ever have that effect? Never. Because these are green lighted by YouTube, right? Or your politicians such as Hillary Clinton associated with spirit cooking and, the book on her table, for instance. Nothing wrong with glasswork or liking glasswork, but this happens to be glasswork that exclusively is creating glasswork of devils and demons. Look who she's associated with. Again, this is just referencing the cult. Everyone knows this. Here's your Marina character here who says she's not a witch. She's not a witch, everybody. Okay, I don't know what she is. What does she call herself? A priestess or whatever the case is. And here she is with two snakes. So she's not a witch in a classical definition, but she's trying hard to act like one, right? Here she is in one of her quote-unquote performances where she gets a knife or something and she cuts an actual pentagram into her stomach. Because of why? Right? And she's involved in like spirit cooking and weird stuff like, the Podestas and all that, and as you all know, human cannibalism, it's kind of like this motif of it. If you look in the background of one of Podesta's paintings, it has someone eating themselves. Right, so Marina Abramovich, I can never pronounce her name. There she is with Mr. Rothschild there. That painting is called Satan Summoning His Legions. What I always loved at this was this. I've said this a number of times. When I've seen this, it just cracked me up. I can't remember how long ago this, because this is one from my archive. I guess this, because the copyright for Reddit is dated 2020, so it must be like 2020 at least. But the person just had one comment at the top, which was, because it has Marina, who's not a witch, by the way. She states she's not a witch. Next to Mr. Jacob Rothschild there, the late Jacob Rothschild, with the painting of Satan summoning his legions behind, and they said, just another piece of the puzzle. There's the close-up of Satan summoning their legions. And of course, here's another one, just the occultic stuff here, and going down memory lane. There is the famous Edmund de Rothschild bracing boat, and the artist that was contracted in order to do all the design work for the boat and the wrap for it was actually Cleon Peterson, who you can see here. Now, I've talked about him in the past. He was actually a heroin addict or a drug addict that became basically plucked out of nowhere and became the super famous indie artist, I would say, on that kind of level. Now, world famous, obviously, if you have your name on a Rothschild boat or your artwork on there, you have made it, right? Okay, if you've got patrons of the arts that are the Rothschild family, you don't really have to worry anymore about anything. But here he is Cleon Peterson there, and this is from 2019. You can see there. He was apparently lived on the street and was addicted to hard drugs. Nothing wrong with a full turn away and being able to recover from that, obviously. But here you have Cleon Peterson there from that boat. Well, what kind of drawings does he do? Right. This is the just reference there to the article if you want to go look it up from 2017. Here is some of the text there. This is Edmund de Rothschild has proven innovative, and this is just this art of the open sea. Here is Cleon Peterson's artwork. Again, and I'll say this, another piece of the puzzle. Nothing. You might look at this and you might go, okay, just some art, probably looks pretty kind of negative, I would say, but it's, I've read Weird Tales, I was just reading Ice Cream Man. I have no problem with horror comics or anything at all, okay? But there's a theme in his artwork, and I'll show it to you. People are always killing each other. For instance, here is the couch. People basically killing each other. It has to do with murder and killing. All the art. All of his art every panel has to do with murder and killing. Okay, this is, look at this, black on white, just killing each other. We're in this particular arrangement, all these black individuals are actually killing all the white people, just murdering them and killing them, stabbing them to death. This is his artwork. Now, I was looking at some art from the 1980s, and it was just like these geometric designs and funny characters and stuff. Or if you look at the Basque, is that his name? I can't remember. He's a famous artist. Worked with Andy Warhol, etc. He was actually addicted to heroin as well. I think they killed him of an overdose in the end. I think it was like 26 or something. A lot of people die around that age. It's interesting, isn't it? There's another kind of interesting thing. But here you have just people killing each other. Again, this is his artwork. Look at it. Look at this. We're just killing, murdering, stabbing each other. That's his artwork. Okay, here's some of the only artwork. These are the only artwork that's just not static, is this basically black sun design where people are scratching each other and stabbing each other in a circle. Here's another one. This person's killing, and he's got a machete there. This person's bound up. That's his artwork, right? So why would you pick, in terms of this wrap? Why would you pick this on your boat? What would make somebody look at that kind of artwork and go, that's the type of artwork I want on my boat? Some weird stuff there, I've got to tell you. And of course the Queen, For instance, the Queen has a specialist nursing system as she went to hospital. Here's for instance, one of the nurses, and what does she has? Masonic and a pentacle on her actual clothing there. Now, this is something which is described as the nursing agencies, and pentacles, they're stating, really signs of Christianity. There are churches that have pentacles in them, but just interesting because this is a completely largely a hidden order, although they do have some of their symbolisms online now that you can. But the monarchy is completely laden, obviously, with cryptic symbols that only mean something if you go to some dusty book. Supreme Court, I don't have to get into. Why is that a giant eye? It just goes on and on. I think we are pretty much at an end. I don't really have to go on about all the other stuff, I guess. You go to NASA, you go to the Nazis, all occultists, especially NASA. For instance, this is one of the individuals behind the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He's also history's most important rocket scientist as a full-on occultist. He believed it. He believed in launching rockets at certain types of days or nights or certain occasions because this was more palatable to the occult world. That's Jack Parsons, so on and so forth, who also knew one of the founders, or the founder, I should say, not one of them, of Scientology, Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. You say what you want about L. Ron Hubbard, but I'll tell you what, as a writer, he actually holds the Guinness Book of Records for the most books ever published. That's someone who knows how to work. I'll tell you. That's what's back in the days when you had to type them out, right? And not just like tell ChatGPT to write you like, I don't know. ChatGPT, write me like, what do they do? Write me a crime novel, ChatGPT. That's not really writing. And if you're gonna do it, okay, at least actually make the outline and do all the dialogue and do all of that yourself. You'll find that. I think it's, what am I telling people? You can do whatever you want. I mean, what difference does it make? Use the tool how you want to use it. It's not like you're trying to be some artist or whatever. If you want to go write your crime novel, but I think you'll find vastly more enjoyment if you do all of it yourself and just get it to fix spelling mistakes or something. That's what I do anyway. I get it to read for spelling and grammatical errors, which are riddled throughout my work. In fact, I was looking at the other page the other day and it had a number of them in it. It's just that it doesn't catch them. It doesn't catch them all. It's just that,
I don't want to burden people by asking them to read. I do have some readers that kindly offered to read my works before they come out, and but I don't want to give them something riddled with errors, if you know what I mean. But there you have it. Isn't Cleon Peterson? Maybe we should collect some of his artwork. Look at it. Look at the vibe it gives. It's so positive. I love it. Look at it. Anyway, what are we up to? 39 minutes. That's it for today's video. Anyway, the next video I will be coming back as we just put, what do you call it? Fire this one off. And when I come back, day after tomorrow, I actually have some, well, I actually have some news. I have collected a lot of news stories. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you later.